a vast wasteland of entertainment where radio has become obsolete, stands an embittered man teetering at the edge of sanity. With help from radio friends, he's about to embark on a global mission that would change the course of history as we know it. Broadcasting live from the secret studios on the banks of the Brandywine River in Delaware is Mitchell K.C. Hill. And up to the Great White North in Vancouver is Alexander Knight.
And does he know how to push the right button? You know, hey, look, we have all this technology, and knowing which button to push at the right point is the scoin of our existence. Hi, and welcome again. I think we're, what, episode 11? It's
Correct.
not hard to keep track of.
Episode 11.
Episode 11. We're really circling that drain of impossibility. According to Apple, you got to have 13 episodes, and then you're legit moving forward. And you can monetize, I understand, also. That's also a good thing. So we can do the smash the subscribe button thing. But anyhow, welcome. This is The Last Angry DJ. My name is Mitch Hill. I'm a former radio guy that was big in the 70s and 80s, and I'm also the representative of the old dudes. My co-host and producer friend who handles all things technical, Mr. Alex Ender.
Good to be here.
I almost said Lindsay. I'm so sorry about that.
You're going to have to practice that. Good to be here, Mitch. Episode 11. Excited to be here and talk with you a little bit about the broadcast industry. And we'll talk a little bit about technology and maybe some things that might possibly be making me angry. But we'll see how this episode plays out. I just wanted to encourage everyone to join us and be part of our community. The best way to do that is by coming into our Discord server. So if you look over my left shoulder right here, you will see a QR code. And if you scan that, I will leave it on screen for a couple minutes there. If you scan that QR code, it will send you right into Discord, where that is the best place to participate, chat with us during the show, and let us know what kind of guests you want on future episodes, what kind of guests or what kind of topics you want us to talk about as well. Eventually, the plan is that we are going to slowly phase out YouTube live chat and YouTube comments, because I really feel strongly that we can moderate better as the show grows. So we have to be a little forward thinking here and think about the greater community. I think Discord is just a much better place than the cesspool that is online YouTube comments. For now, it's okay because of the size of the show, but I'm Alexander Knight. I'm just going to put my lower thirds up. You probably already know who I am, but I'm going to leave that up there just for a second here. But yeah, it's good to be here, and we need to talk a little bit about the broadcast industry. I actually have some questions for you, Mitch, if you're okay with that, about your days.
I'm okay.
Oh, good.
I'm okay. Oh, by the way, that's who I am too, in case you're wondering.
You know, one of the questions that I was having, that I was thinking about in the last couple of weeks, because it was one of the things that they stressed at broadcast school a lot, is preparation. Preparation is key. They always hammered that home. And I just wanted to ask you, you know, obviously you're a seasoned broadcaster, but what are some of the things that you did to prepare for your shows back in the day? And how would you contrast that with your early days when you were first starting out, sort of super green, versus once you reached a certain level of success and notoriety? Did anything change in terms of like how you were prepping for the shows? How did you get over any anxiety that you may or may not have had while you were about to go on air? So we want to know. We want to know the tips.
Wow. Inquiring minds want to know. This is why we're here. That's why we're having the solo version of today's office hours. I got office hours on the head on The Last Angry DJ. Maybe we should go to take two, but that's what we would normally do. It's a very interesting question. I did not go to broadcast school. To be honest with you, a lot of people in the industry kind of eschew, yeah, that's right, I just used that word, broadcasting school. But for some people, it's the only entree that they had to the business. When you start out where you can start out. And that's the cool thing about broadcasting as an industry, is there's a lot of levels that you can go through in order to move on. You do level based on the size of the market you're in, the size of the radio station, and the consequence of that station, how much time you have on the stick, sort of like when you're flying, how many hours you have as a radio person. You begin to overcome any specific fears that you might have. the ability to talk extemporaneously, another big word. Let's highlight them. Extemporaneously, just like Sesame Street. And get used to the presence that it requires to have the on-air thing. There were two big things that I had to go through in broadcasting. I practiced even before I got on the radio. I had a little setup in my bedroom when I was a little tiny little tot, and I used to talk into a microphone and pretend there were people there listening. That sort of got me into it. I was a Mr. Microphone kid, and then at high school, luckily our high school had a closed what they call carrier current radio station, so I could go into a room and play records. But who was listening? Maybe one or two people, if that. But it didn't matter. It was just the opportunity to sequence the records, talk, figure out what you're going to say, those kinds of things. And as you do that more and more, you get more and more experienced at it, and it becomes easier and easier. And then I got lucky enough to get a job at the biggest top 40 radio station in town. And I started out by doing what we called Sunday Morning Drive. That was where I just played the tapes for the religious programming that was a requirement. There used to be a time where you had to have a certain amount of public service content, religious programming, other things. And they usually just jammed all that into Sundays when most people were listening to the radio, unfortunately. And it just sort of got me proficient at sitting in the control room and sequencing the tapes and doing things. And to me, I would have paid to do that. It was just the greatest high in the world to be sitting in a room having control over a 5,000 watt AM radio station. It was the tip top of the radio. And then during summer break at school, I was able to get the all-night show. And again, a great turning point for how to start out, because I graduated from running tapes into being an actual disc jockey, doing the all-night program. And you get a lot of leeway. I mean, we had sponsors for it, and they just gave you copy points. And they said, just do 60 seconds on Concord VW. And I would I just learned how to, to ad lib and talk about cars and how great it was that they were sponsoring the show. And there was nobody in the building. I mean, I was literally by myself, looking out the window, seeing the big towers blinking, the transmitter behind me, pumping all that audio out there. So, all of us have our own opportunities to start. Nobody jumps into the hot seat in afternoon drive or morning drive or any of the big times radio stations. And if you're lucky enough to have the opportunity that I had in radio back then, you had to start somewhere, and that was where I started. And as you did it more and more and more, eventually they start, like when I went back to school after the end of the summer, they kept me on retainer to be the swing shift DJ. And what that meant was the swing shift guy filled in for people when they were on vacation. So all of a sudden I was doing every air shift. I mean, I was a kid in school, in high school, in the 7th or 8th grade, doing afternoon drive, filling in for the afternoon guy or the morning guy or the nighttime guy. And many a time I'd be at the station doing my homework in a production studio, waiting to go on the air in the big room behind me. So to answer your question in a roundabout way, you just do whatever is available. You go to live remotes, you spin records at the basketball games, you did whatever you could do. And as much as the radio school was eschewed, as I said, it was an entree. It gave you an entree. For me, it was just like playing around as a kid and then getting on the air. You start wherever you can start. And you might be a gopher.
Yeah.
And what a gopher is a go for this, go for that. Like they wanted to feed the crew at the station. I'd run out to the Arby's or wherever else and get the food. So you just sort of build. It's like any apprentice job. Like, for example, if you're going to be a plumber or an electrician or something that doesn't necessarily require a college education, you just do it by learning. And you have to start at some, greenhorn level to be able to get there. So, there was no one turning point for it other than just doing. And all of a sudden, you're in it. You're in it now.
That's a very good point, and you're right. And for a lot of the kind of stuff that we do too in the video production world, audio world, I mean, there's there are schools now, but I would say the best education is just throwing yourself in the fire and just doing stuff and breaking stuff and figuring out why something breaks, and how do you actually resolve it and how do you get there. I think those are all important things to think of. But in other words, what I'm actually hearing from you is you've always been a blabbermouth ever since you were a kid, just blah blah blah. You just
thanks for that. It's so
can't
kind
stop
of you to
talking.
say that.
Can't stop talking.
And yet, as a kid, I was very, very introverted. I didn't talk, but somehow having this alter ego was the blabbermouth, as you say. Thank you, appreciate that. So it was sort of a personal experience to come out of a shell and become controversial or have an opinion about things or be able to do what I'm doing right now. Just being able to face a camera and have a live mic in front of you and have a conversation like this requires skills, and I have skills based on experience. So yeah, thanks for saying that. The other thing is, if you want to get into broadcasting, you don't need to go to college. Save your money. Put that $100,000 or so that you otherwise would have spent. What you really need is the experience. And nowadays, there are actually more opportunities for you as an aspiring radio person to get into the business, because there's so many entry points into media now because of streaming. You can be a podcaster, an audio technician.
I wonder
a
about
voiceover
that
person.
Though, because the modern. I don't know too much about the modern hiring landscape for broadcast, particularly. Let's just stay on the topic of radio stations, because, for example, like let's say if you wanted to do something super super basic, at the radio station, I get the feeling that they don't want to hire people that haven't actually come from a school now, and I don't know if that is actually, if there's any truth to that. But that's the impression
they don't go out of their way to avoid a student.
Okay.
What they really want is experience. So chances, it's like anything else. It's like, how do you get the experience if you can't get the job? But if you went to school for it, fine. That's a good starting point.
Yeah.
It gave you an entree to the business, and at least you know the terms. You know that's the MCR, is the master control, and you know what this is, and you know that is. But it's easier than ever because it's all computer skills. So if you have computer skills, you already got one big leg up on how it is.
Yeah, and one of the things that concerns me, we sort of touched on it with, and I don't recall what previous guest it was that we were talking about this, but we were just talking about, the current generation of people that are getting into broadcast, let's say now in their early 20s. There's a trend, and not just in broadcast, but in a lot of companies, where now you have to wear a lot more hats, and you really have to show that you're bringing in a lot of added value, and you need to know a little bit about a lot of different things. But the problem is that the compensation it's not commensurate necessarily with knowing all those things. They just want you to work really long hours and do a lot of extra stuff without extra pay. And I'm not sure when exactly that started, but that is always a concern of mine, that we have now a whole new generation of people that are super, super stressed, that have to do all these different jobs and not necessarily make more money. And it's harder now than ever to make a living now, especially in this city. I mean, Vancouver's an incredibly expensive city to live in. So is Toronto. Those are two big Canadian cities that are very crushingly expensive. And we're seeing people leave city centers in droves because they can't afford to live here anymore. That's a concern. And I don't know, how do you feel about that, Mitch? Do you think that that's an issue nowadays, that people are being pushed to, you got to know more. You got to know more about all these different little things.
Well, you're indicating it's something that's recently developed, and I will say you just described the way it was for me when I got into radio in 1970. It's exactly the same way. It was based on how many different things can you do, and I tried to do excel at production in the production room, doing commercials, dubbing commercials to carts, which is something we had to do. And I also taught myself a lot through engineering with the help of the chief engineer at the station, saying I figured as many different things that I could do to be helpful, whether it's dragging equipment to a remote broadcast, hooking up the phone line to the equalized line to do a live shot, running the board for the DJs when they're out on location doing a remote. Anything you could bring to the party made you that much more of a useful person. And anybody that's getting into broadcast, I'm here to tell you, They're not doing it with hopes of making it really big and making a ton of money. The people that make money in broadcasting, particularly radio, there's a handful of them. There's not a lot of room for Howard Stearns. That's an exception.
Well, not anymore, certainly.
He's an unusual. Well, and even back then, there was a handful of people that could make big money. I made big money for a while when I was in Philadelphia, but big money back then was like $40,000 or $50,000. That would have been big money. If you put that in today's dollars, maybe that's more like $500,000, something like that. But again, if we're talking to people that wanted to get into radio, Mark Giuliani makes a comment that he wished there was a school or had gone to school to learn all these things. The school's not going to be able to teach you a lot of the hands-on what it takes to do what it is that you do.
Yeah.
That an actual breathing radio station is going to teach you, because lots of jobs are there for you.
Well, when I went to broadcast school, I mean, we did have to learn a little bit about everything. I mean, you had to learn how to write sales copy. You had to learn how to write, how to do voiceover work, read ads, that type of stuff. You had to learn how to be an on-air personality. You had to learn how to talk directly to businesses to actually get them to actually buy ad time. So you had to, and you learned about journalism, certainly, and you learned a lot about it. I think those are valuable skills. I'm not saying it's not valuable to learn all these different things, because also, if you're coming out of school, you may think you have an idea of what direction you're going to be. Okay, I'm going to specialize. I want to be an on-air talent, or maybe I'm going to go into sales at a radio station, or I'm going to do something else. But you may not be 100% certain. So I suppose I do see the value in learning all those different things, because you may not be certain of where you're actually going to end up. And actually, back to the money thing too. It seems to me that there's more money now in daytime television stuff, and people that are on-air personalities on camera seem to. I look at this sort of the median salaries, what these people are making, and there certainly seem to be they make more. Even people starting out in those positions, if they manage to get in front of a camera, they end up making a lot more than people on the radio are making. I mean, there are some people on the radio that are making minimum wage. You can't really live on that, right?
Well, we couldn't live on it back then. You can't live on it today. If you can go on camera and look halfway decent, you're worth more to the individual organization. But let's keep it to radio. Radio's made a little bit of a translation into podcasting and video, like morning shows now are broadcast on YouTube. Maybe their podcast. So there's a visual component to it. But a lot of radio people are really good at radio, myself included, didn't really make it wasn't an easy transition to video, because you have to have a presence. Like most radio guys, if you took them for their first time to be on camera, they'd be like, hey, it's whatever, and they'd be looking around or doing the thing, throwing their hands up, and they don't look very visual until they learn how to make a presentation, how to engage the camera with their eyes, like I am right now. I'll say the example was when you had the two shot of us while you were talking. I didn't realize that was in the shot, so I was kind of looking around and looking kind of like silly, or luckily not primping. There's a lot of things that have to go through your head when you're on TV, so that's a whole different beast. But I think the basic part of the conversation here is that, is radio a legitimate business to pursue, or broadcasting business to pursue in today's world? I would say it is not. But it's a good, like your school experience was, it's a good entree into other things. So if you can get into radio in order to learn sales, or how to make a presentation, or how to write copy, or how to be in production, or how to be a voiceover person, it's a good introduction to those skills. But very few people make money. I mean, talking about bankable money, doing those things anymore. And radio's not in a position to pay, serious money.
Yeah, and also, I don't understand why somebody who's on camera their perceived value is higher. I mean, can you explain that to me? Why is someone on camera making $20,000 a year more than someone who's just as talented, if not more talented, that is not on camera, talking on a microphone? Why are people on television valued so much more?
It's a bit, your popularity or your usefulness is based on hard to quantify things, like how do you look. For example, with all due respect, I know I picked on you about your hairline. I have one to pick on too, but you wouldn't be in a position to be doing a conservative business rap, during the week, because people are going to look at your hair and say, is that an artistic expression? Is he a musician? Why is he doing a conservative news talk show? So your valuation to that would be sort of limited. Some people just come across better than others. Like Tom Hanks just has that, that everyday cool guy opinion. George Clooney. They just have a undefinable quality that makes them good on camera, whether it's film or TV or newscasting. It's very complicated to put your finger on exactly what that is. The other thing about radio and TV is if the ratings come out, or in the Nielsen ratings for TV, and it used to be Arbitron for radio, if they weren't good, you had to move on. It was a very interesting job that you moved from one station to the other until you got to where you needed to be, and that's where you ended up. I got sick and tired of that when I got fired from WFIL in Philly back in the 70s. I just said I'm out of this for a while because I just don't see where the equity exists. The money was pretty good, but the money's only as good as your last ratings period, and there are a lot of things that you have no control over. That determine whether or not you're going to be really good at your job, because you're working under other people's conditions and rules, and you're always going to be, until you reach a position of power. I think Lonnie talked about this. When you get to a position of, did I get it right, Lonnie, the guy from CFOX?
Oh, you mean Larry?
Your friend,
Larry.
Sorry, Larry. Yep. Sorry, Larry. Again, when you get older, the dementia kicks in. Larry explained very well that you have to reach a certain level of power in the business to be able to demand big bucks, how you're going to conduct yourself, what music you're going to play, and how it's going to get played. Way before that, for many, many years, you have to play by other people's rules. And I know that Ray Quinn said this. He moved through the ladder of broadcasting by being a disc jockey and then realizing, well, the DJ doesn't really control what gets said and what gets done here. But I noticed that the program director does have control of that. So he went on to be a program director. And then when he got that job, he realized, being a general manager is the ultimate authority of this station. So now I can control the program director, the music director, and the on-air talent. And then from there, I guess you can go on to group president, vice president of the organization. It's a ladder you have to climb to be able to get to a great position where you can and when influence business.
And when you were on the radio, especially when you first started, before you were making more money, did you have a side hustle, or did you have any colleagues that had a side hustle? I don't know how common that is, because I know in a lot of industries, there are people that always have little side hustles of, they find ways. And as a musician myself, you always look for ways of trying to make money on the side. And is that something that a lot of radio people do?
Yeah. I mean, I always found that being a popular DJ in a market, I'll just use Wilmington, where I'm here from, and where the radio station I worked at, WAMS, WAMS. If I was a recognized, well-known DJ, I could go out and do record hops. Or basic DJ gigs for people, and the money was quite good. I mean, even back then in the 70s, you get paid $400 or $500 a pop for doing a 3-hour gig, and that was pretty good. And then the other area that I made money as a side hustle, as you say, was having a relationship with some of my sponsors on the radio show, whether it was morning or afternoon, a car dealership. And then going to the car dealership, and then inevitably they're going to ask, well, if we give you a Corvette for the season, can you talk about our product and what kind of satisfaction you have as part of your show? And I'd say, sure. I'd get a free car or use of a car. I never got actually given a car, but it's extra money that can come in. Sometimes it's more money than you made on the air. When I was at WFIL in the days when Joel Denver vacated the station, went on to his career. I took over one of his big dances he was doing. It was Paul VI, the Jersey Giant. And I had to go in there and audition for it in front of the Catholic Church to be the guy that did the once-a-week radio show. And I split the proceeds, the cover charge, with the diocese at the school. And I would go home with I remember my girlfriend and I we'd finish up, and I'd go home with a suitcase full of dollar bills. It might be $3,000-4,000, and that was a great side hustle. It was probably more than I was making on the air, just getting that kind of money. And the more I brought to the side hustle, I could kind of say to an artist, like Frankie Valli or somebody, and say, hey, can you make an appearance for me at Paul VI on Saturday? And they're like, oh, okay, sure, we'll help you out. So for nothing, he would come in and do a couple of songs, and the people would go crazy, and that was that. I didn't get the Beatles in. I might have gotten like Gary Wright or somebody like that to pop in when they were doing a promo tour. But side hustles, it's a great thing. And it's, again, if you're going to get into any kind of media, learn as much as you can about all aspects of it, even the ones you don't think you need to know about. Because like college, which back to the school thing, you get introduced to different things, and then you have to decide whether or not you can excel in one of those.
Absolutely.
And then turn that into something.
And I will say that as someone who's always afraid of losing their job, no matter how successful I make the company look and how much revenue I bring in, I think it's, for me, I'm always looking at ways of how do I make myself more useful, right? So I think learning a little bit about a lot of different things is super important. Even though you may not necessarily be immediately compensated, but I just feel like it's like a part of my brain is always trying to protect myself from losing my job. And so I suppose in that case, it is valuable to have all these other skills, not just be a one-trick pony where I can only focus on this one thing and I can't do anything else, or I freeze when I try to do something else when someone asks me. So I think there's something to be said for that too.
Yeah, job security, it's a big deal. It was then and it is now. As I said, you're only as good as the last ratings period you had. So you're always on the chopping block on the air. A couple of things I learned real fast in broadcasting. This is before contracts, non-disclosures, non-compete, all those things. Was, like you just said, make yourself invaluable as a multi-purpose individual. The other thing is it doesn't always do well to negotiate the highest pay rate in the station, because when the time comes, and it does, when they have to start chopping the budget, you're going to be the first guy to go because you're costing too much money. I did a gig on a local radio station here after a 15-year retirement from broadcasting, and I took us from 2 or 3rd position to number 1, clearly number 1, and when I started asking for some decent money, because I did it really on the cheap, everybody got really upset. And I said, wait a minute. If I told the story, stop me. I said, what do you think being number 1 in this market is worth to this radio station? And they were like, I'd say $2-3 million in sales. And they go, yeah, something like that maybe. Now, if a salesman came to you and said, I'm going to come into your station and I'm going to bring with me $3,000 worth of sales, would you be willing to pay me 10%? And most guys would say 10% of something we don't already have? No problem. But as the morning guy that made the station, not single-handedly, but I had a lot to do with it, made the station millions of dollars. When I asked for just a tiny fraction of that, everybody got all huffy about it. Well, we don't do that. You're not worth that much. And I'd say, well, test me. Try to test me. So in order to get job security in broadcasting, you got to get a contract. It's the only thing that's going to protect you. A non-compete contract. Interesting story about them right now. They're being challenged in some states. If you're in a right-to-work state, if you've signed a deal that says when they fire you for any reason you can't work at another station, essentially they're saying, if we let you go, you can't work on any other radio station in your chosen state or area of employment. Not only that at that station, but any other market where we actually own a station in that one too. To me, I find that's
I don't like
draconian
I don't like
rules,
that.
and it's being challenged right now. Yeah. And I think Congress is voting on non-compete clauses for everything.
Yeah. And did you have management when you were sort of like you had plateaued, you had peaked in your career? Because obviously, like in that example that you gave, where you were trying to get more money out of them, you obviously had more clout at that point. You had more leverage to bargain. But do you find that having management helps if you're in broadcast. Like, you get to a certain level and you should have management, somebody that can properly represent you and negotiate for you, because of course not, some people are good at negotiating, many of us are not, right? And I feel like having somebody who's really good at that, who can have your back, is probably quite beneficial to your career.
Well, the minute you bring a manager in to negotiate your contract, you're considered to be a bad guy at that particular station. Smaller stations, smaller markets, will say stations in the sub 100 market size would never have management for their employees, because there just isn't enough money to attract them. If you were a big DJ in a big station in a major market, let's say top 10 market, management would be a good idea to have, because they know all the ins and outs. They can speak the language. You don't let your emotions get involved. Having a third party, you're not dealing direct with the talent. So people tend to get a little huffy when you start making demands at a station where they got huffy the minute I mentioned I'm worth more money. And they said, yeah, of course you are. Well, take it or leave it. So management would have gotten you a contract where you didn't already have one. Management would have protected you. When I say management, not station management, the manager, as you were suggesting, they probably would have protected you from a house cleaning, which inevitably happens at most radio stations. They decide to change the format after you work there. That's essentially why I got kicked out of FIL, was they changed the format from their boss top 40 format to a middle-of-the-road contemporary, adult contemporary format. I was a young DJ of about 19 years old, and I was like really up-tempo. I didn't fit in, so they were like, well, he's going because he's right. He's going after the wrong demographics.
And how much notice did they give you? Was it weeks? Was it months that the format was changing on the station, or very little time at all? Or
I'll smile when I say this. We heard your last show. It was.
Ooh.
That's kind of that was the kind of notice you would get. Now, the good thing, when I was at FIL, I had a contract, so they had to pay the rest of the contract out. But that's just paying you for the time it takes you to get another job. And I'd already decided to get out of radio at that point. And I went into one of my talents at that point. I got into doing production work, audio production. That's pretty good at it. So I built a studio and started doing commercials and things like that. I fell into a lot of corporate work.
Yeah.
And, that really worked well. But, being successful in any kind of business that involves talent and hard to define benchmark for how it's popular and how it's worth it is a subject for an entire different discussion about how do you keep that level. But I just fell into the right situation at the right time when multimedia was getting really big in the corporate side, and I was the guy doing the soundtracks for a lot of these big multi-million-dollar presentations. So I was just lucky, and I strung that out for about 10 years.
Yeah.
So that went well.
And that's really interesting that you say that too, because I talk to, I'm sure you do too, because you have friends in the industry, but I know so many people that are in broadcast or were in broadcast and are long retired now, but a lot of them seem to transition to doing voiceover work, whether it's animation stuff, corporate stuff, like a lot of the stuff that you do. It's really interesting, and I'm not surprised by that, because you develop your voice as a muscle. You've developed it over many years and fine-tuned it. So why not voiceover, right?
Yeah, voiceover is good. And by the way, answer one of your questions. You were answering somebody on live chat. I was not trying to convince you did not have a career in broadcasting, nor that you need to change your physical appearance. I think your physical appearance is perfect. In fact, I picked you as a partner, especially, well, let me put it this way. I was immediately snapped up to chance when you raised your hand and said you wanted to be my co-host producer for the show, because you just represent the other end of the spectrum, the millennial side of it, and I the old boomer side of it, and the fact that you have an unusual hairline.
Well, I'm just going to turn to the side. See, the problem is my razor just keeps slipping every day, right? My hand, and it's just like I'm just too lazy.
You need a Flowbee.
I'm too lazy
you have to be old enough
part.
to know what a Flowbee is. I think that it's a good look. I think it's a good look for you, and when you see somebody that has an unusual look, like who's that guy that's on YouTube that paints his face silver? And he does really a great show.
I know who you were talking about.
We had him on one time, and I kind of caught myself picking on him because his face was silver. It was distracting, and I'm trying to figure out, well, what kind of point is he trying to make? It's the same thing with you. Is it a musician saying, this is my personality, and I choose to express myself this way? In the right seminar or place, it's a perfect hairline. It's perfect, particularly if you're doing like an MTV show. Or maybe you're doing a modern streaming, or our podcast right here. You're perfect. I would definitely not take you down for wanting to be a broadcaster.
Well, I
think it's great.
I fully acknowledge this style. There's certain jobs I'm probably going to have a hard time. Like I'm probably not going to be a banker with this look, with the piercings and.
That's what I was saying.
But,
I will. You need a Snidely and Whiplash mustache.
Yeah, exactly. But I do have to say, I do see more and more companies now that were traditionally, let's just say, more conservative on how they want their employees to look. But a lot of that has changed over the years. And if you just look even at Apple, who's a very progressive company, and look at how their employees look and how that's changed, even at their retail stores, they're encouraging more people to be their own unique individual selves, which I think is a good thing. Because look, all I care about when we have when the two of us have a conversation, I care about, can you do your job? Do you know what you're talking about? That's all I care about. If you've got a funky hairstyle, that really shouldn't impact, and I get it that impressions matter and some people fixate on that too. I do fully acknowledge that. But ultimately, for me at least, when I deal with somebody, I care about, do you treat me well? Do you treat others well? Can you do your job properly? That's what I care about.
Yeah, I'm joking with you, my friend. I'm
of
yanking
course, I get it.
A little bit. And you know what? You have more going for you visually than I do, because I look like an old guy. And people look, if they didn't see me, they might think that I'm younger because I have a radio voice and it sounds younger than I actually am. So the minute you see me, you say, "Oh, he's just another old guy." So I have more working against me from my appearance than you do working with you. Regardless of how your voice sounds. I have more things working against me because I sound like a top 40 DJ. I was, and I still sound like a top 40 DJ. I don't have a conversational voice like you do. So you're more accommodating of today's world. You fit in much better than I do. And again, another subject of conversation, ageism, and how do you become, and this is one of the main reasons why I'm the last angry DJ. I'm not as relevant today as I used to be back in the 70s and 80s. And it kind of irritates me because I have, the same aspirations. I have the same talent. I sound pretty much the same. Haven't really changed that much. And yet, I'm having to deal with these things. So between the two of us, coming from two different worlds, I'm hoping that we can scratch the surface of what those reasons are and why those things exist, and maybe drop some of those barriers of entry. If I pick on you, it's 100%. Out of my love for you. You're my friend, and and I respect you for what you are. So if I constantly pick on you because it's low hanging fruit,
I can take it.
I apologize in advance.
And you can talk about. It's been a while. Actually, I haven't heard of you mention my accent, my quote unquote Canadian accent. There's no accent, eh?
It's low-hanging fruit, my friend. I got to take a shot at, and that's the problem with comedy.
Well, hold on, just wait. I want to ask the people, because we've got like nearly a dozen or so people here in chat. I want to know from people that have listened to me on more than one occasion, does it sound like I have an accent? And what is that accent? Please describe it to me. Do I sound Canadian, quote unquote, Canadian? Yes. So I'd like to know. Some people say yes, some people say no.
I can hear it. Aboot.
No, I don't say.
Can you say Z? Can you say the letter Z without saying Z?
Okay, so here's the thing. I will say Z the British way, which is how we talk here. But in certain circumstances with certain words, it's more appropriate to say Z. So I will adjust. Okay. I will adjust how I say that.
So you're accommodating. That's good. That's good. Accents are a weird thing because we're very tribal by nature, as if you hadn't figured it out by now. And when you hear somebody talk, I don't care where they're from. They could be from the U.S. Where in the U.S. is how does their accent give them away? It was funny when I moved. My first job was in Texas, and I was born and bred pretty much on the East Coast of the United States, Erie, Pennsylvania, here in Delaware, and I've got a fairly neutral accent. But when I came to Texas, they said, as a radio guy, you try to sound neutral. So my cohorts at the radio station at KONO used to say, "Wow, you sound like a New Yorker. You sound like you're from New York City." And I said, well, how should I say? You should sound like us because we got neutral accents. You can't tell where we're from. And I said, you sound like you're from the South. You got that Texas thing going. They said, no, we don't. We don't sound like we're from Texas. But you sound like you're from New York City. You're an Easterner. So, that's part of that tribal nature, no matter where you are in the country. I think the only area that they have what they call neutral accents is in the broadcast belt. That's like Western Pennsylvania through Ohio, maybe down just before you get into the Southlands.
I try to get rid of my Canadian, I'm aware of how certain Canadians, especially on the Eastern Seaboard, sound. So I try real careful. I'm sort of self-conscious about it. Guy Cochran in the chat says, you sound like you're from Port Coquitlam.
I can't even pronounce it, much less talk like it.
Speaking from experience.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
funny.
Guy is a good friend, and these are some of our office hours guys. If you're interested in office hours, officehours.global. They're a great bunch of people, and all of the people you're mentioning are friends because we've rubbed elbows. Yeah, it's a weird thing. I mean, that's not just broadcasting. That's everywhere. In broadcasting, it's obvious because you use your voice. You're gonna pick up certain words. It's like a lot of the folks on Saturday Night Live. They're from Second City TV, which was out of Chicago, and before that, in parts of Canada. A lot of those guys, like Dan Aykroyd and John Candy, they're Canadians. They came right out of Canada, where there's a great source of talent up in those ways. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it's funny because have you noticed that in the film industry, talking about accents, that if you want a really creepy villain character, you always had a villain with a real English accent. What did the English people do to deserve that stereotype? That if you're going to be a really bad guy, you've got to speak with an English accent. And it's like they get stuck with all those jobs. And then when you have an English guy doing a obvious, like say a Western, where they're trying to pull it off as a Westerner in the day, and they're doing a Western accent and do it very realistically. It's like, wait a minute, there's something wrong here with that conversation.
I'm always amazed how actors who are born in, say, Australia or England, they could just shut off that accent, with maybe the exception of Liam Neeson, because sometimes his accent comes through when he's trying to do his American accent. Listen to me very carefully.
Yeah, exactly, like Craig did it. And one of the things is inevitably when you're doing commercials, they're going to ask you to do a accent or something. Like I had a client that was in Australia, and they wanted me to do an Aussie accent, and I was like sitting around saying, well, it's not quite English. You start to learn that Australians, they'll talk in the back of the throat. It's all back here, fair dinkum. It's like, would you like to buy a pair of great Dulaki shoes? Come to our store here in Australia.
Okay, no, you got to stop. This is terrible.
And it's like, it's a terrible, but I do just enough of it, he's trying to do an Australian accent.
You creeped in the JFK there for a second.
Yeah, and it's like if somebody says, can you do like a past president? You see, well, don't like broccoli. Broccoli's bad. It's bad for you. And it's like, first of all, it sounds like I'm trying to do an English guy doing a George W. Bush doing the broccoli line. It's very hard. Another crazy thing is that a British actor can pull off an American accent. They can pull it off pretty strangely, and then an American actor doing a British accent always stands out like a sore thumb. Like I just did trying to do my Aussie accent.
Never works.
It's they can spot it a mile away. So what does that tell you about doing accents? Well, if you're going to do an accent for a commercial or something like that, it's like like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger. I kill you last. He talks like this, and he has a way of speaking. It's all his catchphrases. I'll be back. It's like people immediately know that's not an Aussie or a Austrian accent. That's somebody trying to do Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, that's very true. And who I will say this: the only American that had a convincing British accent is, I don't know if you ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but James Marsters, who played Spike. I thought for years that he was actually British. And then I found out suddenly, like I just watching him at a Comic-Con, and he's got an American accent. I'm like, what happened? He does it so convincingly. He is the only person I've ever heard as an American do a convincing accent. Otherwise, most of the time, you're absolutely right. It is, I don't know what it is about us. We have a hard time doing other accents other than just our own. Australia.
Yeah, look at Dustin Hoffman playing Hook in the Peter Pan Takeoff. Is that he was so good doing his I'm not going to try to do an English accent, that they had to overdub all of his dialogue because it was incomprehensible to us. I think that he pulled it off pretty well because he's a consummate actor, but it was too accurate, so he had to like dial it back a little bit so that it wasn't. But you're right, there are some actors that have made a great study of it, and they do it. Like Mike Myers, he's English, he's born in England, and he speaks perfect American, we'll say. And yet, when he goes over and does Austin Powers, he's pretty darn spot on. So he's got a bipolar or bi-country accent.
I will say though, because, and I think he grew up in Toronto, but there's his accent on certain syllables, his sort of Canadian-esque comes out on certain words. Like if you just watch Wayne's World, you'll hear that. 'Cause he's supposed to be a guy that's from Aurora, Illinois. Right. And he doesn't really sound, area. Yeah, he's not really, doesn't sound like he's from the Chicago area at all. He sounds pretty Canadian, especially with certain words. Like when he says, when he says that line, I still know how to party. He goes, and I still know how to party. The way he says that, it just sounds so Canadian, so from the East Coast. So accents are a funny thing.
I'm rewatching all the Matrix, and Mr. Smith, the bad guy, hello, Mr. Anderson. He's got this weird voice, but it's like he's speaking English, but he's got a strange affectation to his voice. Well, he's Australian.
Yeah, but I think that's.
So
but I don't know if that's
to his advantage.
I don't know if that's because he's Australian. I think that affectation that's just the way he decided to. Because the character's a little off because it's a computer, right? He's not human, right? So I kind of
Mr. Anderson.
That kind of like. The way he would just kind of stretch out like, Mr. Anderson. Like he just, nobody talks like that, right?
By the way, you got to be careful when you have the split screen thing here because you just caught me having a little sip of my soda from
that's okay.
McDonald's. Go to McDonald's to get your drink.
Nobody minds. There we go. See, we just did our, look how smooth that segue was into that sponsor slot there.
Explain what a segue is, and can you spell it?
Segway. Yes, I can spell it. Segway is Segue. Is that right?
Nope. You left a Q out.
Damn it. Almost.
It's almost like Segui, just so you know. And it's a radio thing. A segue, and this is an interesting point. I wrote a note a few times to the Steve Jobs at Apple when they first came out with the iPods. And they had this feature where the music would do a crossfade between one song and the other. Well, a crossfade is when one song's fading down, another song is slowly fading up so that they kind of crossfade. And that's not the way we played music on the radio. On the radio, when a song was fading out, the next song would come on at full volume just on the downslope of the previous song. That's a segue. There's just no space in between where the two songs, a song doesn't completely end and then the next song comes on. A segue is there's a little bit of a ring out from the previous song. And I was trying to explain in an email to Steve Jobs, you need a segue position on your iPod because that's the way most people are used to hearing songs play. You never like to hear the intro of a song sort of slowly fading up under it. It's like if it was Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who. You don't want to get rid of that first guitar twang. You want to hear the whole thing, but you want to hear it at the right point. So anyhow, it's one of my pet peeves. Segue. It's an important word in the radio business.
That was incredibly unnecessary, but educational. Thank you very much, Mitch.
It's a pet peeve, so why could it be necessary? It's important to me.
Sure.
And since we're on this solo version of our show, and by the way, tell us if you like the fact that once in a while, not all the time, once in a while we're not going to have a guest. It's just going to be me and Alexander chatting back and forth. And I have some questions for you.
Oh, really? All right. Well, fire away, sir. Let's see if I can answer them
all
properly.
Right. Radio people all have fake names. Just about. Not everybody has a name like Mitch Hill that sounds like a radio name. Now, Alexander Knight may or may not be your real name. I'll leave it up to you to decide whether it is. But does it have anything to do with Knight Rider? Is there a story behind Alexander Knight? And did it come out of your radio school training?
Okay, well, if you're just going to say that, I guess I have to address that. Yes, that is correct. Knight is not my real name, and I don't use my real surname anywhere on the internet and haven't for well over a decade. Yes, when I was growing up, so Knight Rider came out, I believe the first season, September of 1982. I was born in August of 82. So when I watched it, I believe I was 4 years old. So I was watching reruns. The show ran for, I think, 4 seasons. So it probably was
You were a
already
zygote.
It was probably already over by then, and I was obsessed with that show. Probably way too young to be able to watch that show, considering some of the adult themes. But my grandfather knew that I loved that show, and of course, David Hasselhoff looking all cool with his leather jacket and pop collar. My grandfather found a store that sold a leather jacket that was big enough, or I should say small enough, for a 4-year-old kid. Real cowhide. Like, he spent hundreds of dollars on this jacket. He bought me that.
Dollars?
No, I said dollars.
No, you said dollars.
No, I said dollars.
Play that little previous bit back.
Yeah, where's I need somebody on.
I'm just checking you. That's all. I'm checking you.
But
it's dollars.
I have
so you know.
I have a photo of myself wearing that jacket. So I was obsessed with that show. So yes, Knight comes from the last name of the main character on that show, played by David Hasselhoff. So it was Knight. His last name was Knight. First name Michael. I didn't decide to change my first name, but yeah, I go by Alex or Alexander Knight, which is how people know me on Office Hours. So you're hearing it.
Congratulations.
This is the Last Angry DJ
exclusive. Exclusive. And why was I called KC Hill at WFIL? Because at WFIL, we all had to have a name that was a derivative of a popular artist. Like Joel Denver, I guess it was on recently, who worked at WFIL. Joel and Denver. Joel is his real first name, but Denver is not. And Denver was John Denver. And there were other guys that were on there that were a derivative. Mine was KC and the Sunshine Band. K period, C period, not KC, as in Casey Kasem.
Yeah, and I think, a stage name, I just wanted a name that would be memorable, right? Because if I were to use, because my last name is actually Greek, and it's 12 letters and very hard to pronounce.
It is? Wow.
I don't think it would work
Greek.
well. I don't think, first of all, I don't think my first and last name, and especially if you put my 2 middle initials fully spelled out, if you what you saw on my birth certificate, that won't even fit into a lower third. And I don't think my actual last name would work well in broadcast. So
all right,
that's my story. I'm sticking to it.
And I think it's a good story. I mean, the genesis of our name. My first radio name was Bobby Dark, and back in the 70s, Bobby was just like Bobby Sherman, Bobby whoever, Bobby. There's so many Bobbies floating around. And what happened is that the station I worked for was too cheap to have a jingle with the name Bobby, or not Bobby Dark, but Mitch Hill in it. So they said, go in there. There's a real tape back there, and we got a bunch of shouts, which were shouts for radio names like Jack McCoy and Bob Alexander and all these crazy names. And one of them was Bobby Dark. And it was the only one on there that I thought fit because I was all of about 16 or 17 years old. So I was Bobby Dark only because they were too cheap to spend the $75 to have my real name sung. And the funniest thing...
Yeah, no,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. You finish.
I was going to say that the crazy thing about my first job away from town, I went to San Antonio, Texas, and the first thing I said to the program director is I said, please, 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 can I use my real name? I said, I know that you have the money to buy a real jingle. And they turns on the radio and said, coming soon to KONO, Bobby Dark from Wilmington, Delaware. I said, darn it. So I didn't get to change my name after like 3 radio stations. And FIL was the closest I got to my real name. So it was just a radio thing.
Is there any etiquette in radio could you just have a single name, like just a first name, like Madonna goes by Madonna? obviously. Do
Sure.
they allow that, or do you have to have a last
Sure,
name?
they could do that. I mean, if you had the personality to pull it off, if you were to be called Donovan, then you were Donovan. If you're Grease Man, I guess that's 2 words, but he kind of used it as 1 word. Then if you ever heard Grease do his radio show, he would say perfectly suitable to his name, Wolfman, Jack. All the crazy names out there. We used to make up names of radio go like Mike Switch, Pete Moss, Sam Diego. We had all these crazy names that
I like
based
Mike
on
Switch.
things.
That's good. I like that. I should steal
Yeah,
that.
Mike Switch. Why not? Let's do that. And today, the name might be something related to your identification. You might have a name. It, them, this, whatever, which is everywhere now. I just watched a Doctor Who episode where they were identifying as them, this. I guess was one of the characters was on there. So, what's in a name? It's whatever you make it into. So if you have a crazy name and you want to use it, I think you've ultimately realized that you don't have to have a name to hide behind or build some kind of personality. People will accept you. I think authenticity is better today than it was then. So the more authentic you are, the better you were. If I use my real including my middle name, which is Eckerd, Mitchell Eckerd Hill. That's a real middle name, and yes, it's part of the Eckerd drug family. It would have been a kind of a strange thing because people would be tripped up by the middle name. So depending on how hard your name is to pronounce or what it relates to, it just gets in the way. So simple is better. Easy. Bobby Dark was probably a great name for me. I should have kept it the whole time.
Yeah, I like that.
It's easier than it's either than Mitchell Hill, and they always say Mitch Hill, and I say Mitchell Hill, Mitch Hill. It just you go down a rabbit hole every time you try to explain it to somebody. So I'm more towards authenticity these days as far as radio.
Okay, there's something I got to bring up because it does bug because I keep hearing people use that word all the time now, being authentic, authenticity. How would you define that? What does that really mean? Because I just feel like this job is somewhat performative too. We have to make this as entertainers. We have to make the show interesting. So I don't know, how authentic can you really be? What does that mean to you?
To me, it just means if you're real or not, or if you're trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes. In the world we live in today, everybody's trying to read between the lines, no matter what you say or what you're referring to. They're interpreting what you mean and how you sound. And if you sound different for some reason, like it's my problem as a communicator and radio guy that spent lots of time to sound the way I do, I can't sound authentic because when I use this voice in a conversation around a dinner table with a bunch of guests, hey, I'll have the roast beef. Could you pass the gravy? It's like people kind of look at you strangely. They sometimes think you're talking loudly or they don't quite understand it. So I would say that relates to authenticity because it's not a voice that you would normally use in general conversation. So, your voice is more authentic than mine is.
Do you ever break out into your Orson Welles doing the peas commercial? Every July.
You bet your ass. I turn into it.
Peas growth.
Yes, Groton's fish sticks. If they aren't the best fish sticks, I'll have sex with you. That was kind of like the way. Look it up yourself. I'm not going to explain what happens in it, but there's a classic breakdown of Orson Welles reading a fish sticks commercial for Mrs. whatever her name is.
Yeah, actually,
it's a classic.
What I was thinking about doing this weekend is downloading a copy of that Orson Welles commercial where he goes off because the audio is just so bad, and I was thinking about running it through some of these modern AI tools to see if I can really clean it up because it's really, really hard to hear what he's saying. So I just love.
Yeah, that would be
love,
cool. You know what else is cool? There's a guy that he takes popular songs and isolates the vocals, like the Mamas and the Papas. If you just isolate the vocals, it's a thing of beauty. It's almost angelic the way they sing together. Take the song "More Than a Feeling" by Boston, and Tom Schatz, who's singing the lead in it. They've isolated his voice out of it without autotune. By the way, they didn't have autotune back then. It's fantastic. You got to say, how did he possibly do that? The interesting thing about the original Boston album is that he spent years perfecting that in his own home studio to get it exactly right. Not to the extent that Steely Dan would, but the extent that Tom Schatz did, who was also an engineer. It's fantastic. So check it out, listen to him, and isolated audios like you were just suggesting. It's magical. And they just did it with a big Beatles song. I think that John Lennon had a demo that he did and from a cassette, and they turned that into a song.
They did. Yeah, it was really impressive. I took a listen to it. It was, it's really incredible, the technology that we have now, because I never would have imagined, not even 10 years ago, that we would have gotten to the point where we have tools that can actually tell the difference between human speech and actual background noise and be able to separate that. And it's creating these incredible opportunities to restore all this old audio. Just when we had, a few episodes back when we had Larry Hennessy on here, and he was talking about, because he does a lot of tape restoration, right? And he uses a lot of these tools to be able to, like a lot of the restoration that he the restoration work that he did on the Poppy family, and to be able to, go back and separate these vocals from all the other instruments, and to have these, guitar stems and vocal stems and separate bass stems, and have all of that, and to be able to really create something that sounds like it could have been made today. I think that's incredible. And this stuff is evolving.
Why the Poppy family? There's got to be songs out there screaming to be, but which way you going, Billy? Come on. That's right up there with, and it was funny because I mentioned both that one and Terry Jack's Seasons in the Sun, two of my target, why did they do that songs? But anyhow, sorry, Larry.
Yeah,
it's a thing. Yeah, being able to to recover those, and to hear how back in the day when they didn't have Pro Tools and things like that to record, they used tape and multi-track tape machines. And heck, the Beatles, Sgt. Pepper was done famously on a 4-track tape machine. How did they manage to do that? And by the way, speaking of the Beatles, we have a guest coming up in a couple of weeks. His name is Andre Gardner from a Philadelphia classic rock station, WMGK. And he also does a syndicated show called Breakfast with the Beatles. He is probably the most knowledgeable Beatles aficionado that I know. So he'll be an interesting guy. If you have any Beatles questions that you want to put in there, please, that's in 2 weeks. And then next week, our very good friend from Office Hours, Tom Ferguson, will be here. And you're saying, who is Tom Ferguson? Well, Tom is a radio and TV engineer. And the interesting thing about having him on the show is that Tom told me, I've got pictures of the way studios used to look back in the day, like how they were constructed, what kind of equipment was used. This is back when you actually were spinning 45s and playing carts on tape. He's got all the rooms. So a lot of us that are older radio guys that used to do that are absolutely enamored with studio pictures of he's going to sort of explore old studios from the 60s through the present day, what they look like. So it's a sort of a glimpse of the room. We're removing the curtain from The Wizard of Oz, so you can see some of the handles and levers that had to be pulled. So that'll be fun. That's next week, same time, same bat channel, right here.
Well, I'm excited for that. I always love behind the scenes stuff. It's one of the things why I still collect physical media, because I love, as someone who's really into production, I want to see how they actually make all this stuff. So to be able to, and because of my audio background too, studio builds are something that I'm always curious about. So I love seeing how all that stuff comes together. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that. Mitch, did you have anything else you want to talk about this week? Anything else that's driving you insane?
I'm driving myself insane. Not really. It's the general feeling that, in my case, getting back to what makes you the last angry DJ, is your ability to be relevant in today's society. And you would think that a guy that had as much experience as I do in the broadcasting business, moving to today, would still be just as relevant as I was back then. And the answer is no. And then the question would be, well, why? Why aren't people relevant at some point in their broadcasting career? How do they become old? From a listening standpoint, is it a cultural thing? Is it a they just sound old? I think it's a little bit of all those things, but I think mainly it's the preconception of what an older person is on a current radio station. For example, I'm 69 years old, and I have old radio credentials that are really quite good, but I don't think I'd have an easy time of it if I wanted to get back on the air on a contemporary radio station like a CHR or even a hot AC station, because they immediately say, oh, well, he would have been good back in the 70s, but he doesn't sound authentic enough for today. So there's a little bit of an attitude that I have about that situation existing. And the main reason that really ticks me off, thanks for asking, is that I always thought that when I was close to retirement age in my chosen field, which was video and audio production, that I could always get back into radio, which was something that I have a near and dear feeling in my heart for. And all of a sudden I'm finding I can't because of other things that have nothing to do with what I bring to the table, but are preconceived notions, prejudice, ageism, all of those things working against me. So that is a little bit of an explanation for why I'm doing this podcast, because trying to find a common ground for, is it something that I can change? I could. I'm a voiceover guy by trade, so certainly I should be able to sound like a younger guy. But if you take all this away, and I just did that. If you take all that away, what are you being judged on? How you look on a radio station? My mom used to say, "Hey, Mitch, you have a face for radio. You should do well in this business." The face has nothing to do with it. It's the voice and what you're saying. So it's the context. So what do you listen for in radio? Because
I hear you.
There may not be a job anymore because radio is kind of bland when you get down to it.
Yeah, I hear you. And but I feel very strongly, because ageism is a thing. We've talked about it before. We'll continue to talk about it in the future. But I'll talk about it just for a little bit here, but I really do feel that, quote unquote, feeling old or being perceived as old, I just really feel that that's more of a state of mind, because like I sometimes when you talk, I feel like you have a bit of a defeatist attitude. Like, I'm not saying you could easily just go back into the broadcast industry now. I'm not saying that, but I'm not saying that if you feel like you want to do something, if you feel like you can contribute, you have a lot of many years of decades of experience to draw from. So I think that's still incredibly valuable. And physical limitations aside, I really do feel that a lot of it is attitude. It's about, are you willing to constantly grow? Are you always keeping up with the times? With technology, technology is moving at such a breakneck pace right now. Even I have a hard time, as somebody who is constantly steeped in technology, I have a hard time keeping up with what's going on with AI. So, I have to work at it. And I think that I think everybody should be willing to constantly work on this stuff. If you want to stay relevant, that's up to you if you don't want to do that. But I really feel like, anybody can. It's just, do you want to, right? That's a choice.
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that I sound defeatist sometimes, or I'm kind of hard on myself. I do that on purpose to a certain degree, and the other part is, you're right. It's just a affectation of me, but I do it to a degree because I don't think you can have a little over the top personality without having a little bit of a sad clown along for the ride, because it sort of tempers it. People don't take it as you being a little too egotistical. There's that, and the other thing is that for me to come back on and do a podcast was a big decision, because there are so many radio people that are good friends of mine, and I wish them the very best, that aren't going to retire. They're going to take them kicking and screaming into some dark corner they choose to go into, and yet they choose to do something. A lot of them are doing podcasts of various, but all of the podcasts seem to be about trying to recapture their past glory when times were different and when they were different and radio was different. I don't think that works. I think people don't want to go back to those days. People don't care so much about, well, when I was a kid, it was like this. I think for out of mere curiosity, it might be interesting, but to try to go back and recapture it, I think is sort of pathetic in a certain way, and I mean that with the most amount of respect. So I was very reluctant to just jump in and do a podcast for the sake of doing it, because I didn't want anybody to think that I'm trying to totally recapture past glories. What I really thought was interesting was, if I call it The Last Angry DJ, he's obviously got a little attitude about something, and you have to think, well, what could possibly be that makes him angry? And I think I pointed that out. But this podcast would not work without you, Alexander, and the point of that is that you represent a completely different point of view. And you're also somebody that has a strong enough personality that you're willing to call me out when I get a little maudlin and defeatist or negative, or if I talk too much, to tell me to shut the fuck up or whatever the case may be. You have the right to say or do any of those things. But I think there's a secret sauce to this particular podcast, because we have two people going at it from different directions. Not only are you younger and more contemporary and more relevant, but you also come from the Great White North. So there's another piece of it that's a little bit different. You're visually different. You're geographically different, and you're a kind of a newbie to broadcasting. So I think that those two things together worked well to make this podcast interesting, because of the flow between you and I. Where's this going to go? We have no idea. We're just approaching our 13th episode, and who knows where we're going to take this. How far are we willing to do this because of the love of the business, the love of just talking?
All the way.
Yeah, we're going to take it all. We're going to ride this rocket right into the ground.
I'd like to know from other people, though, listening to the show. I mean, what do you think of the dynamic between Mitch and I? Because I always feel like I come across as older than I am, just like if you just listen to the words that I say, because I feel like I do. Do I come across like a little bit of a curmudgeon, like too much so for a guy that's in his early 40s? Because I just feel like everything irritates me, right? I just feel like it's just like I don't like the music today. I don't like what people are listening to. I find like this new generation seems to be getting dumber and dumber by the minute. I mean, it's just like everything annoys me, everything.
Well, the fact that you're a musician, and I am not, I respect the heck out of that, because you're doing something that I've just never taken the time to pursue. Maybe I don't have maybe it's just I just don't have it in me to be. I mean, my axe was a record player. That people say, what instrument do you play? I say a turntable. That's my instrument. But I liked how you think. If that makes you more like me and maybe older, sorry. I mean, birds of a feather seem to flock together, but you're a little more in touch with what's going on in the world today. And that's why you're the producer of the show, because it really needs to come from the perspective of a younger person, not from my perspective. It's going to come from your perspective. That's the connection. I don't know what our chat people are saying, but that's kind of the feeling. I'm sort of a little bit of a fish out of water, dealing with circumstances. And if that makes me a little bit angry, okay. But at the same time, I don't want to be angry all the time. I'm just saying that I have a reason to be angry, but it's not in my nature to be negative all the time. So I don't think you come across that way. I think you come across perfectly for what it is that we're doing. I think you have a good attitude. I learned something about younger people that I was really surprised with, and I might have mentioned this story before, but I was flying one day to Florida for one reason or another, and I had a iPod when it was fairly new, and a young woman sat next to me, and I say young, probably in her teens, and she had a Walkman CD player, the old CD Walkman, and I said, "What are you listening to?" And she said, "Pink Floyd." And I looked at her, she was all of about 14 or 15. I said, "Pink Floyd at your age?" And she said, "Yeah, they're boss," or whatever she said. And I just smiled because I was thinking, see, music just once again shows that it's something that transcends age groups and styles. And as much as I sometimes poo-poo music the way it is today, it always comes back to surprise me that classic rock is still classic rock, regardless how many years have passed, and it's still just as relevant for the times. And that's reassuring to an older guy that's an older disc jockey that did well, like me, because of what's happened. So I just have to say this was a great conversation. I love having these solo chats once in a while. And Alexander, you bring up points that I think are very, very valid and interesting. And I would never feel insulted by anything that you would ask me. You could even pick on my hairline if you choose. There it is, folks, for all's wonderful glory for what you want to do. You have anything else you'd like to say to wrap things up today?
You know, this is one thing, and you actually brought this up, is that about younger people liking older bands. I know a lot of young people that get flack for wearing band T-shirts. You know, you ever see someone like that looks like they're in their 20s wearing Pink Floyd T-shirts, for example, because you brought up Pink Floyd.
All the time.
And do you think, does that person, are they just wearing that to be trendy, or do they actually know Pink Floyd? Do they actually know their music? Maybe some people, because people always get blamed for just wearing band T-shirts to be trendy. You know, and I think women are typically the target of this too. I hear guys always say, she doesn't even know what Pink Floyd is. She probably doesn't even know what they, you know, but I feel like most people that I talk to are genuine about, you know, if they're going to wear a band T-shirt, it's because they actually know the band and they know the music and they are fans of the band. I don't know anybody that just wears band T-shirts randomly just for fashion. Do you?
I did it because I got them for free from the record companies. But if you're making a point, if you're trying to say, look at me, I'm wearing a Pink Floyd shirt, that's why we wear symbols and logos and things like that, because we want people to draw a conclusion from our localization. Can I say that? That makes it sort of sets you apart from everybody else, because now you know where I'm coming from. You know, so I can see that as being a reason for wearing it. But if you were a true musician, I don't even think Pink Floyd wears Pink Floyd T-shirts. So, you know, do you know that that's Roger Waters, you know, or whoever? Does he need to advertise that? Or he's already had his say and he said it through his music. You know, it's very interesting to watch interviews with, Billy Joel or Ringo Starr. And these are all things that are being. By the way, our friend, again, who's going to be us in a couple of weeks, Andre Gardner, just talked to Ringo Starr recently. So it'll be interesting to see how we were able to span the globe, being able to do all of that.
Very cool. Before we leave the show here, I just wanted to remind people, and we're going to fix. I didn't realize the Discord link is not working. That would explain why nobody's going into it. We're going to get that fixed for next week. So thank you for letting us know. For now, if you'd like to reach out to us on social media, we're at The Last Angry DJ on Twitter, Instagram, I should say X. I really don't like that name. Instagram, Facebook. We're on TikTok now. We're everywhere. You can also email us, hello@thelastangrydj.com. And I feel like we're inching closer, but at some point we will have a Q&A system, which will help us field your questions a lot better in a more efficient manner. So we'll let you know once that's implemented, and I think that'll make the show a lot better for sure.
And while you're there,
the chat,
we need to go one more up on our subscribe. I've been staring at the same number for the whole show. Can somebody just hit subscribe right now? I want to see it jump one more person, just to make us feel better, so that when we sign off, we can sit back and smoke our preferred beverage and say, we got that one extra person. I don't know how fast it's supposed to jump up there, but it's not moving right now. So I'm very disappointed. It's okay to vote more than once. That would be good. All right, so much for that. But we want, when we come back next, we got to have one more person, just to make us feel better about doing this, because there's a lot of time and effort and stuff that goes on to be able to make this show happen. Alexander, thank you so very much for your questions and your insights. As always, I'm very appreciative of those, and I always feel better. That was a salute he just gave me. I'm always appreciative of the opportunity to expound on my past experiences with the hope that it might enrich the lives of millions, perhaps hundreds of people out there watching. So again, thank you so much. Don't forget to watch us next Sunday when Tom Ferguson will be here to show us what kind of little rooms we used to be locked into to become disc jockeys on the radio. It should be fun. See you then.